about 3 weeks ago, and I saw a speech by Mohammed bin Salman. And Mohammed bin Salman, or Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is the head of government of Saudi Arabia. And he was giving a speech at the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is the association of all of the oil-producing countries that are part of the neighbours on the Arabian Gulf. And it was a very, very strong speech, and it was about the great period of prosperity that was going to be experienced by the region in the next 5 years. And there was this very confident speech about this huge boom that was coming for all of them. And I was kind of puzzled by this, but I got a better understanding by looking at a presentation that had been done at the end of January by the executive director of the International Energy Agency, whose name is Fatih Birol, who's been has been the executive director of the International Energy Agency for around about 5 years. Has had enormous influence on it. And he's an interesting guy himself. He's basically a Turkish guy who's made his way in a city of French bureaucracy, which is some considerable achievement because after many years, the French still won't let the Turks be members of the European Union. But anyway, it was a wide-ranging speech, and there were many issues right out to 2050. But the part of it that I wanted to talk about was his view of this year, which explained a lot about why Mohammed bin Salman was so optimistic. Firstly, he started by saying, now this is the end of January, he started by saying that he expected that Russian production would fall by 1 million barrels this year. And that was about 3 weeks before the Russians announced that they were going to reduce production by 500,000 barrels as a protest against sanctions. The reason that Fatih Birol had given 3 weeks before the Russian announcement, however, was completely different. He was saying that the real problem was that the Russian oil fields were getting older, and they'd lost a lot of their maintenance technicians, and they were no longer able to maintain them. So they were forced to reduce their production by 1 million barrels a day. So that's the first thing we know about demand going forward. Or about supply going forward. He then said that he thought that demand is growing, and that we expected, or they expected, the IEA expect, demand to grow by 2 million barrels a day in calendar 2023. So already in a situation where right now supply is pretty much equaling demand in the market. You've got 1 million barrels a day disappearing because of the Russians, and you've got 2 million barrels of additional demand. So you're short 3 million barrels when you get to the second half of this year. So the question then is, where does that additional 3 million barrels of oil come from? So what he said in a very diplomatic discussion was, now demand is growing, and we think that 900,000 barrels a day will come from China. And the reason we know that is because jet fuel numbers in China are very, very strong. So he said the combination of strong demand and the possibility that supply growth will be not strong enough may mean that in the second half of this year we will see a tightness in the market unless OPEC plus countries change their position. Whether they will or not be in a position to comfort the markets. There is a certain amount of spare capacity that they have, not much, but it would be enough. Now, I looked into the data that was released with the February report, And I found that in total, OPEC has 3.5 million barrels a day of spare capacity. And of that, Saudi Arabia has 1.83 million barrels a day of spare capacity. And the United Arab Emirates has 0.9 million barrels a day of spare capacity. So that adds up to 2.7 of the 3.5 million barrels a day. So where you get to in a situation, which is it's not like normal modelling. You're in a situation where you know that the market is going to be 3 million barrels short. Where is that 3 million barrels going to come from? And that entirely depends upon the decisions of really the two major producers of OPEC, whether or not they wish to supply. So the game is entirely under their control. And therefore they can generate a price that will give them 5 years of enormous prosperity, or they can supply the market. We won't know until the second half of the year. But it makes for a very interesting position where it's not necessarily predictable, but the game is entirely in the control of the Saudis and the Emirates. And if they do what we would expect them to do, play it tough, we will have a very strong price move in the oil price in the second half of this year.